In 1967, I was dying inside. My back was destroyed. The doctors said I'd never kick again, but that wasn't what was killing me. It was the realization that all my training, all my dedication, all my breaking of traditional barriers had led me to nothing. I was trapped between two worlds, too Chinese for Hollywood, too Western for the martial arts establishment. I had spent years perfecting 10,000 kicks, studying every fighting system from Wing Chun to Western boxing. I could break boards, I could defeat opponents, I could demonstrate techniques that impressed audiences. But I was still unknown, still struggling, still hitting walls everywhere I turned. The traditional masters dismissed me as a rebel. Hollywood saw me as just another Asian face. I was caught in limbo, watching lesser fighters get opportunities while I remained invisible. Then, one sleepless night in April 1967, something extraordinary happened at 4 a.m. I wasn't looking for a breakthrough. I was just sitting in my backyard, frustrated, exhausted, staring into the darkness. But in that pre-dawn silence, my mind began to work differently. Connections formed, insights surfaced. I saw patterns I had never noticed before. That single hour changed the trajectory of my entire life. Within 6 months, I had developed the intercepting fist, the core principle that would become Jeet Kune Do. I had created techniques so unique that Hollywood finally took notice. The Green Hornet audition came, the breakthrough followed, but none of it would have happened without those 4 a.m. sessions. This wasn't meditation, this wasn't prayer, this wasn't even traditional training. It was something far more precise. 60 minutes of mental archaeology that unlocked potential I didn't even know existed. While the world slept, I was excavating the depths of my own understanding. Not with my body, but with my mind. Not through repetition, but through revelation. I was discovering that the real fight wasn't in the dojo, it was in the silence between thoughts. The practice became my lifeline. Missing even one morning felt like betraying my own potential. I would protect those sacred hours more fiercely than any physical training session. Airlines could delay flights, directors could change schedules, but nothing could interfere with what happened between 4 and 6 a.m. Danny Inosanto was the first to notice. "Bruce," he said after a sparring session, "you're not fighting anymore. You're responding before the attack even begins." James Coburn pulled me aside. "Something's different about your energy. It's like you're seeing 3 moves ahead." But I told no one the source. This was my secret forge, where breakthroughs were hammered out in the darkness before dawn. It was too precious, too powerful to share until now. What I discovered at 4 a.m. wasn't just a training method. It was a doorway into human potential that exists for exactly 1 hour each day. Most people sleep through it. I chose to step through it. The question isn't whether you're willing to wake up at 4 a.m. The question is, are you ready to discover who you become when you do? The months before that breakthrough were torture. I was training 8 hours a day, but I felt like I was moving through mud. My techniques were mechanical, precise, but lifeless. My understanding was shallow. I could execute movements perfectly, but I couldn't feel their deeper meaning. I was like a musician who could play every note correctly, but had no soul in the music. I would practice the same combination 1,000 times, hoping that repetition would somehow unlock the secret. But there was no secret to unlock through repetition alone. I was trapped in a cycle of technical perfection without true understanding. My back injury had forced me to think differently about martial arts. I couldn't rely on pure physical power anymore. I needed to understand the essence beneath the technique, but no amount of conscious analysis could get me there. The harder I tried to think my way to mastery, the more elusive it became. Then came the night that changed everything. It was April 13th, 1967. I had been lying in bed for hours, my mind racing with frustration. The pain in my back was constant, but the pain in my spirit was worse. I was 26 years old, and I felt like I was running out of time to make my mark on the world. Around 4 a.m., I gave up on sleep. Instead of lying there torturing myself, I walked out to my backyard and sat on the wooden bench Linda had placed under our orange tree. The air was cool, almost cold. The neighborhood was completely silent except for the distant hum of the freeway. I wasn't meditating, I wasn't trying to solve problems, I was just sitting there, defeated, staring into the darkness. And then something extraordinary happened. My mind was different, clearer. It was as if a fog had lifted that I didn't even know was there. I could see connections between techniques I'd been practicing for months, but never truly understood. The Wing Chun trapping hands suddenly linked to boxing footwork in a way that made perfect sense. The timing of a straight punch connected to the philosophy of intercepting, not just as concepts, but as living realities. In that pre-dawn quiet, insights began surfacing that would have taken me months to develop during regular training. I wasn't thinking about these connections. I was seeing them. They were revealing themselves to me in the silence. I sat there for 2 hours, not moving, just watching my understanding transform. By the time the sun rose, I had grasped principles that had eluded me for years. The intercepting fist wasn't just a technique, it was a state of being. Attack and defense weren't opposites. They were the same action expressed differently. The next morning, I was back in that backyard at 4 a.m. Not because I had to be, but because I couldn't stay away. I had discovered something that no martial arts manual had ever mentioned, a mental state that exists nowhere else in the human day. Between 4 and 6 a.m., the conscious mind operates differently. It's awake, but not yet engaged in its normal filtering and categorizing. The unconscious mind is still accessible, still offering its overnight processing. The two minds work together in a way that's impossible during normal waking hours. I started waking at 4 a.m. deliberately, systematically. What I discovered was that this wasn't just a good time to think, it was the only time when certain types of understanding could emerge. The analytical mind that normally blocked intuitive insights was quiet. The creative mind that normally scattered during busy hours was focused. In that pre-dawn silence, I could feel the difference in my own consciousness. Patterns became visible. Connections formed naturally. Solutions to problems I'd been wrestling with for months would simply appear, fully formed, requiring no effort to grasp. This wasn't about being an early riser or having quiet time. This was about accessing a specific neurological state that exists for exactly one window each day. Most people sleep through it. I had stumbled into it by accident, but now I was going to master it systematically. The quality of insight during those 4 a.m. sessions was unlike anything I'd experienced. One morning, I understood the true meaning of no way as way. Another morning, the complete structure of what would become Jeet Kune Do revealed itself like a blueprint. These weren't gradual realizations. They were sudden, complete understandings that arrived fully formed. I realized I had been training my body for years, but I had never trained my mind to access its own deepest capabilities. The 4 a.m. window was my laboratory for that training. And what I discovered there would change not just my martial arts, but my entire approach to human development. The breakthrough wasn't the techniques I developed. The breakthrough was discovering when and how breakthroughs actually happen. The first phase was the most delicate, the most mysterious, and ultimately the most powerful. I called it mental archaeology because that's exactly what it felt like. Carefully excavating the buried treasures of the previous day's experiences. Not the obvious moments, not the dramatic victories or clear defeats, but the subtle fragments that my conscious mind had dismissed as unimportant. The practice was deceptively simple. I would sit completely still on that wooden bench, close my eyes, and let my mind drift wherever it wanted to go. No agenda, no forcing, no trying to solve problems or analyze techniques, just archaeological patience. Like an archaeologist who brushes away sand grain by grain to reveal ancient pottery, I would let my consciousness gently sift through the residue of yesterday's training. A feeling here, a micro-expression there, the way someone's weight shifted, the sound of a footstep, the particular quality of hesitation before a strike. Most people think the mind processes experiences as they happen. I discovered that the real processing happens afterward, in the quiet spaces between conscious thoughts. The 4 a.m. mind was perfect for this work because it wasn't yet cluttered with the day's demands. It could focus entirely on archaeological excavation. One morning in June 1967, I was sitting in this receptive state when a fragment surfaced, so small, so subtle, that I almost dismissed it. It was the memory of a split-second moment from the previous day's sparring session. My opponent's right shoulder had tensed, barely perceptibly, about half a second before he threw his punch. In normal consciousness, this would have been just another forgotten micro-detail. But in that 4 a.m. quiet, this fragment suddenly exploded into complete understanding. I didn't just remember the shoulder tension. I felt it, understood it, saw how it connected to his breathing pattern, his stance, his timing, his entire approach to combat. That tiny observation became a revolution in my understanding of timing. I realized that every technique telegraphs itself through dozens of microsignals that the conscious mind is too busy to notice. But the unconscious mind catches everything. It sees the shoulder tension, the subtle weight shift, the brief hesitation, the change in breathing rhythm. In that single 4 a.m. session, I understood timing in a way I never had before. Not as a concept to be studied, but as a living, breathing reality that could be felt and exploited. The intercepting fist wasn't just about speed. It was about reading these microsignals and responding before the attack was even fully formed. But the archaeological process revealed far more than fighting insights. Another morning, a fragment emerged from a conversation with Linda the previous evening. She had said something about water taking the shape of its container, just a casual observation while washing dishes. In the 4 a.m. quiet, this fragment connected to my frustration with rigid martial arts forms. Suddenly I saw the principle that would become central to Jeet Kune Do, be like water. My subconscious had been working all night, processing thousands of micro-observations my conscious mind had missed or dismissed. The way a boxer's glove angled slightly before a hook. The particular rhythm of a Wing Chun practitioner's footwork. The philosophical implications of a random comment. The emotional undertone of a student's question. During normal waking hours, these observations remained scattered and disconnected. But in the archaeological space of 4 a.m., they would suddenly coalesce into patterns, insights, breakthrough understandings that felt less like discoveries and more like remembrances of things I had always known but forgotten. The breakthrough came when I realized what was actually happening neurologically. During sleep, the brain processes the day's experiences, making connections, finding patterns, solving problems. But most of this work happens below the threshold of consciousness. The 4 a.m. archaeological phase was my way of accessing that overnight processing before it got buried again under the day's new activities. These sessions revealed patterns in my opponents that I could exploit, the way certain fighters always shifted their weight before changing direction, the particular breathing pattern that preceded a power strike, the micro-expressions that revealed fear or overconfidence. But more importantly, they revealed patterns in my own techniques that I could refine. I would discover that my left-hand trapping was microseconds slower than my right, not because of any physical limitation, but because of a subtle mental hesitation I hadn't consciously recognized. Or I would realize that my most powerful kicks came not from muscle tension, but from a specific mental state that I could learn to access deliberately. The philosophical insights that emerged during these archaeological sessions were equally profound. The concept of no way as way didn't come from studying ancient texts. It surfaced one morning as I was sifting through fragments of frustration with rigid training methods. The understanding of simultaneous attack and defense didn't come from analysis. It emerged from archaeological excavation of a moment when I had blocked and struck in the same motion without consciously planning it. The practical results were extraordinary. Within weeks of beginning this practice, I could anticipate my opponent's movements with uncanny accuracy. I could sense openings before they fully appeared. I could feel the emotional state of my training partners and adjust my approach accordingly. But the most profound result was the development of what I came to call pattern recognition intuition, the ability to sense the deeper structures underlying surface experiences. This wasn't just useful for martial arts, it transformed how I approached acting, how I understood people, how I navigated the complex politics of Hollywood and the martial arts world. The 4 a.m. timing was crucial because this type of archaeological work requires a specific quality of mental receptivity that exists nowhere else in the human day. Too early, and the overnight processing isn't complete. Too late, and the conscious mind's normal filtering has already begun. The window between 4 and 6 a.m. was the only time when this delicate excavation could occur. 20 minutes was the optimal duration I discovered through experimentation. Less than that, and the deeper fragments didn't have time to surface. More than that, and the conscious mind would begin to interfere with analysis and judgment. This phase taught me that the most valuable insights aren't the ones you think your way to. They're the ones you archaeologically uncover from the treasures your unconscious mind has already discovered, but hasn't yet had the chance to reveal. The art wasn't in the thinking. The art was in the patient, skilled excavation of what had already been found. If phase 1 was archaeological excavation, phase 2 was precision engineering. After 20 minutes of mental archaeology, My mind had surfaced the raw materials, the insights, the patterns, the subtle understandings that needed refinement. Now came the systematic work of perfecting these discoveries through what I called perfect practice. The method was deceptively simple but demanded absolute precision. I would select one specific technique and rehearse it mentally with surgical accuracy. Not visualizing it casually, not daydreaming about performing it, but engaging every neural pathway as if I were actually executing the movement. The technique I practiced most often during these sessions was my 1-inch punch. This wasn't because it was my favorite technique, but because it demanded such precise coordination of timing, breathing, and muscular engagement that it served as the perfect laboratory for mental rehearsal. I would begin by visualizing my stance, feeling the exact distribution of weight between my feet, the specific angle of my knees, the precise alignment of my spine. Then I would mentally position my right hand exactly 1 inch from an imaginary target, feeling the particular tension in my shoulders, the specific angle of my elbow, the exact position of my wrist. But here's where perfect practice differed from ordinary visualization. I didn't just see the technique, I felt it with complete sensory engagement.